more and more people are increasingly aware that we're a much more mysterious species than we give ourselves credit for, and that there are many more mysteries and secrets in our past. And this intuitive sense that people have is driving them to re-examine the past of the human race. Whether or not the historians and the scientists want to do it, the people themselves are leading the way in this quest for the truth about our own past.
Near the Peruvian town of Nazca, these magnificent patterns crisscross under the shadow of the Andes Mountains.
Nazca, superficie de Coscara 1302, buen día. 1302, buen día, adelante. Solicito contacto de esta cuatería la siguiente línea.
The Nazca lines are long ruler straight lines, certain arabesques and pictorial figures across 30 miles of desert pampas on the plain of Nazca.
Some of the lines go for hundreds of miles through the Andes, perfectly straight way. And these lines, in fact, when they come to obstacles like cliffs and things, don't go around them, go straight over them. They crisscross, they cut through each other. So Nazca's a hugely interesting, enormously interesting place, and it is mysterious.
Erich von Däniken, author of Chariots of the Gods, feels the gods the Nazca Indians were dealing with actually were aliens.
They made some landings in Nazca, and what is left in the desert are some lines, some traces, like wagon tracks, wheel tracks. Now the natives believe that these are the signs of the gods, and they start to think they wanted to show us this. They wanted that we do the same thing. The natives start to make lines in all kinds of direction. Long ones, small ones, thick ones, thin ones, all believing for the gods.
According to Van Daniken, the Nazca people mimicked the work of aliens, creating similar lines to honor and appease them. He says Nazca priests later encouraged the people to make earthly designs or offerings.
And he say, we must show them that we are here. We must show them that we have sacrifices for them. And now in a later phase, in the midst of all these lines, they start to create gigantic figures of fishes and monkeys and spiders and so on.
It's a pretty simple explanation to say, hey, people believe that their gods lived in the sky, so they made giant things for their gods to see. That takes fewer jumps, fewer logical leaps than saying extraterrestrials landed on Earth and had something to do with those zoomorphs.
The Nazca and Palpa drawings cover a total area of nearly 600 square kilometers, and, to be created, thousands of tons of stones were shifted. Only a very important reason could justify any activity of this magnitude. In order to have an overview of the larger drawings and direct the creative work, an overview was necessary and achievable only from the height of a sufficiently high hill, but on the plain there aren't any. Therefore, that only leaves flight. But who had the capacity to fly over this plain centuries ago? The oral tradition of the Nazca speaks clearly. The Paracas. A 1586 report, written by Magistrate Louis de Monzon, explained what the plains natives said about the origins of the drawings. During extremely ancient times, a small group of people called Paracas, who differed from the Indios, reached this land, and the Indios obeyed them, followed them, and realized roads which can still be seen today. The Paracas suddenly left, but promised to return. The figures have been drawn with an accuracy which has baffled researchers who have examined them. The zoomorphic drawings have been traced with one continuous line, meaning with a technique which is even more difficult in terms of lines and geometries. One would think these are more recent, as they are more sophisticated, but on the contrary, they are more ancient. Therefore, the logic which states that human progress grows in time fails with the regression of technical capacity. How can this be explained? Oral tradition helps by reporting that suddenly the Paracas left for an unknown destination. Could this be the right explanation? When they left, the Nazca found it impossible to trace other zoomorphic figures. So they were limited to continue drawing easier lines and geometric figures. Who were the Paracas? A myth, a legend, or a historical truth? Were they the true inspirers of the great civilizations of the past? Could the gods be the survivors of a remote and forgotten civilization which had reached a level of progress equal to or higher than the current one?
The human skull is made up of 8 cranial bones that surround and protect the brain, and 14 facial bones that form the underlying structure of the face and support for the teeth. With the exception of the mandible, the bones of the skull articulate with each other through joints known as sutures. Throughout the skull, holes known as foramina serve as passageways for blood vessels and nerves. Bones on the surface of the skull encase the brain, protect sensory organs, and serve as attachment sites for the muscles of the head and neck. These bones include the occipital bone, parietal bones, temporal bones, and the frontal bone, as well as the nasal bones, the zygomatic bones, the maxilla, and the mandible.
But this one doesn't have the, it doesn't have this plate up here. There's not, even if you look like that, you can't see any sign that it was ever there. So that's kind of, that's quite strange. And this is another factor is, this is what's normal in a human being, is that you have a hole on either side of your jaw. And that's where nerves and blood vessels come out in order to feed that part of the body. But this one and the elongated skulls, they have either one, sometimes they have 2 of them in the back of the head. And of course, the first time I saw that, people said, well, that was just that was just a birth defect or something, or that was surgical. But the way that it's shaped is that it's it's not like a puncture point. It curves in, and that's that would be part of the natural process. So again, it was actually Lloyd Pye who pointed out. He said, well, that would be something nature would have designed because of the changing in the shape of the skull, or the fact that it's natural that way, that that the body would, nature would create an area for the nerves and the blood vessels to come out through the back of the head in order to feed it or give it proper
So you've got that on this one as well, then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all of these, if you do have them, that one had, you can see that one there. It may have had 2 of them, one on either side, but one's missing because of the trepanation that happened. This is their artwork. This is an example of a little detail on one of these giant mantles or mantos that were buried with the dead, and the symbolism is, very complex. You have, for some reason, you commonly have a serpent figure coming out of the mouth, and so smiling, and all these snakes everywhere. These supposed bird figures. And then this transformational character, because he has the mouth of a jaguar or a puma. And it's like, okay, well, where did this come from? Where did this symbolism come from? It's like, well, we don't know. There is basically no local knowledge. The Paracas people, even if they, began here 3,000 years ago, they died, we know that they died out about 200 AD as the result of the mixing in with the Nazca people when they arrived. But that means that no Paracas descendants have existed for almost 2,000 years. So there are no oral traditions. There are no descendants to talk to. All we have is the physical evidence that we're looking at, and that's making my job tough, but it's makes it intriguing, because I am bound and determined to find out where this comes from. Nobody knows why the trepanation was so prevalent. It's not that it was surgery to repair something, it was surgery to alter the brain, to go into the brain and approach the pineal gland and try to manipulate it to make it grow or make it do something, because the pineal is known to be responsible to a great degree for psychic power. So what I and others are starting to think is that, especially as the natural skull population, which was always very small because it was the little ruling class, as it began to fade, that's when the binding began in an attempt to physically bring them back. This was probably a desperate attempt to try to bring you can alter the shape of the head, but if these children grow up and they're not different from the others, then you're going, well, something, what's happened to the abilities of the great ones that came before? So by manipulating that gland, they were attempting to try to make it grow or turn on or do something so that these abilities would come back that gave them such supposed power.
There is a strange similarity between the ruins and myths found in many parts of the world, almost an echo of a long-lost, forgotten civilization, a highly developed breed of superior beings who disappeared thousands of years ago. A mother culture we have no memory of.
I think we're talking about a massive cover-up. As I said, over the past 150 years, these archaeologists and anthropologists have covered up as much evidence as they've dug up, literally.
Basically what you find is something we call a knowledge filter. This is a fundamental feature of science. It's also a fundamental feature of human nature. People tend to filter out things that don't fit, that don't make sense in terms of their paradigm or their way of thinking. So in science you find that evidence that doesn't fit the accepted paradigm tends to be eliminated. It's not taught, it's not discussed, and people who are educated in scientific teachings generally don't even learn about it.